This video isn't about guessing, and it's not about looking for autism signs in every toddler. It's about sharing our experience using real home videos so you can see what those early signs actually looked like for us. We'll look at things like different types of stimming, language and communication differences, sensory sensitivities, how a strong interest in letters developed into spelling words at the age of 2, and many more. This isn't medical advice, it's simply our lived experience. When Emma was around 18 months old, her nursery raised concerns about her development, and by that time we've had our own concerns as well. And by the age of 22 months, 2 different pediatricians told us that she's very likely to be autistic. In my previous video, I talked about the early signs of autism in babies from birth to the age of 1. This video looks at the signs that became clear as a toddler, mostly between 18 months and just under 3. The first and most obvious sign for us was the communication differences. By around age 2, Emma's communication was clearly very different from other toddlers her age. Emma didn't respond to her name at all, and also it was very hard to get her attention. And this was the nursery's biggest concern as well. They actually thought that she might be deaf at the time, so we've had to take her to multiple hearing tests just to rule this out. It's one thing that she didn't use any words to communicate her wants or needs. She didn't use gestures either. For example, she didn't point to the things she wanted. What she did instead is she used us as tools. So she would hold my hand like this, and then she would pull it towards what she wanted. Or sometimes she would pull my foot and try to put it in a shoe, but she wouldn't make eye contact while doing this. By the age of 2, we were already working with a number of different professionals, and we did try very hard to develop Emma's communication skills. And it wasn't really just about spoken words. We just wanted to find a way for Emma to at least be able to communicate her basic needs. Around the age of 2, we started to introduce picture exchange communication, but this was very, very difficult, and Emma was very resistant to engage with this. I think we've spent months to just get her to use 1 or 2 little picture cards. And as I said, this sign isn't about speech alone. It was about communication as a whole, how Emma understood, expressed herself, and interacted with others. Sign number 2 was Emma's lack of awareness of what was going on around her, especially during events or routines. And this wasn't about behavior, this was about understanding. It was about meaning. Emma didn't seem to understand what the different situations meant, and she didn't really engage or get excited for any of these situations. Things like birthday, Christmas, Easter, or even just simple activities we've tried to do together. It just didn't register for her, and it was really, really hard to get her to engage. This video is an Easter egg hunt that we set up in the garden just for Emma. She didn't follow the trail, didn't look for the eggs, and didn't react to the big box of Lego at the end. And when we handed her the basket of chocolate eggs, she didn't recognize them as treats. She just tipped them out onto the floor and then stacked them on top of each other and just smashed the eggs and everything. It wasn't that she was being difficult, she just didn't understand what the activity was or why it mattered. Other toddlers might not follow instructions perfectly, but they usually show some anticipation, excitement, or curiosity. Emma showed none of that. The situation had no meaning to her. And this lack of awareness didn't just show up in events. It also affected how she related to people, which led to the next sign. Sign number 3 was limited eye contact and social engagement. Emma rarely made eye contact, and when she did, it was brief and fleeting. Emma's always been very affectionate in a way that she always liked to be in my hug. She's very sensory, so she always liked to touch somebody. So even though she was kind of locked in her own world, she was still coming to us and just sit on my lap or sit next to me. It was like 2 different worlds existing next to each other, but she would let me pick her up, she would let me cuddle her, and she started to smile a lot more around age 2. But the important thing to note is that everything had to be on her own terms. So for example, she would very, very rarely let me join in her play, but she would bring toys. And for example, when she would line up her toys, she would sometimes come to me and then she line up the toys on my body, but she wouldn't let me touch the toys. She would still want to be around me and kind of use me for her play, but everything had to be on her own terms. She had to control every situation. And this was very similar at nursery as well. So she would go to the adults for a cuddle and she really liked to be held. She really liked nice and tight hugs, but she wouldn't interact with them. She wouldn't engage with them. So the one thing to note about Emma, she never masked because she's not able to mask. So Emma has always been the same in nursery or school as she is at home. This wasn't shyness. It was more like that people weren't that relevant to her at the time. That brings us to the next sign that became more and more noticeable as she got older. Sign number 4 was stimming and repetitive movements. For Emma, vocal stimming is the biggest one. She's always done that, but it became pretty much all day long from around the age of 18 months. And she's always been very, very vocal with her stimming. And till to this day, at the age of 7, almost 8, she's still doing lots of vocal stimming during the day. She flapped her hands as well occasionally, but what she did with her hand mostly was this position. Most of the day, at least one of her hands would be in this kind of position, and then she would do like this, or sometimes she would wave her hand in front of her face. And she did some rocking as well, but for her, this rocking back and forth thing, she did it sometime, but that wasn't her main stim. As I said, the vocal stimming is what she does most often. But the one thing she absolutely loved was spinning around in circles. She would spin around so much until she got dizzy and fell on the floor. At first, it's easy to think that it might be a normal toddler behavior, but for Emma, it was the frequency and the consistency. She was stimming most of the day, every single day. These stimmings helped her regulate and process the world around her. Stimming was part of it, but how she played was also very different. Sign number 5 was how Emma played. I don't think I've ever seen her play with the toys, how she would supposed to play with them at that age. She loved to line up everything, not just the toys. And she loved to stack the toys on top of each other as well. And she loved her Lego Duplo. But even with the Lego Duplo, she was just keep stacking them higher and higher and higher. Or she would lay them out in this board and then she would just organize her Lego pieces. But she wouldn't look at them like, oh, this is a giraffe or this is the policeman Lego or anything. She would just line them up piece by piece, like how you would put the pieces on a chessboard. And she absolutely loved the toys with the wheels. She would just pick them up and spin the wheels of the toys. She was doing this since the age of 8-9 months, so this wasn't something new. She could play independently for long periods of time, but again, the important thing to note is that Emma's always been like, she wanted to be near me, but doing her own thing. So even when she's lining up the toys, if I am in the kitchen, she would bring the toys to the kitchen to line them up there. Or if I am on the sofa, she would bring the toys, line them up on me. I think I've been really lucky in the sense that even though Emma couldn't engage traditionally, she always wanted to be near me, which I'm really, really grateful for. So we can connect in our own way. And that intense focus showed up even more clearly in her interests. Sign number 6 was her intense special interests, especially in letters and numbers. Emma became fascinated with the letters of the alphabet at a very young age. She's learned each letter of the alphabet around 20 months old, and even though she was nonverbal, she could make the letter sound. So she would go around and then she would say like A, B, 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 and she could point out which one is which. And then we've got her these big alphabet stickers and put it on her wall around her eye level. And at first she would just go around pointing at them, but after a while she started rearranging them and lining them up correctly and everything. It just started to take over her world. She wasn't interested in any other toys. It had to have something to do with the letters or the numbers. And she would just keep lining up the letters of the alphabet correctly. She was about 22 months old, and I laminated these alphabet cards for her because she loved them so much. And then she started bringing them to me one by one. And then she would say, A, and she was keep going. And I was so surprised. You keep going, you keep going. And she's done all the letters. And I was just sitting there thinking, I don't think it's typical for a 1-year-old to know all the letters of the alphabet, because it wasn't like she would sing the alphabet song. No, she would individually find the correct letters and then say the letter and the letter sound. So it was absolutely mind-blowing. Her obsession with the letters and the numbers went from about 2 to 2.5. Every day she would line up the letters of the alphabet and then she would make the sounds. By around 2.5, she started to say like "see cat," but she wouldn't use any of these words to communicate. So she's had some echolalia or just some scripting and repetition from around age 2.5, but she hasn't used a single word until the age of 5 to communicate with anyone. She could say "see," "car." She would say these words as she was going through the alphabet. So by around 2.5, she could go through the alphabet and say a letter with a word, but she couldn't use a single word to say anything to us. It was so weird because we're like, she knows all those words, but she can't use them. How is this possible? How can she have no functional communication when she has these words in her brain? She can sound these words out, but she can't use them. We're still working on her communication. She is still not conversational. At least she can ask me a lot of things now, but we still don't have back and forth communication. It's very much on her own terms. She comes to me and asks me for something. I used to do some college work from my computer. Emma's got fascinated with the letters of the alphabet on the keyboard, and she loved the Microsoft Word, and she would come and sit down. At first, she would just find all the letters of the alphabet on the keyboard and type them in, and she loved to change the color. So I had a laptop which had this small touch bar on it that you could pick colors and stuff, and she would, at the age of 2.5, she would write all the letters of the alphabet one by one as she found them on the keyboard by herself, and then she would color code them and everything. Around 2 years and 7-8 months, she started to make actual words. So she would go through the alphabet and then she would write apple, ball, cat, dog. She would go by the letters of the alphabet and she would write each word starting with the next letter of the alphabet. That was mind-blowing as well. I was like, she's 2.5. How can she type words on a computer? And then she did the same with the Legos as well. So we bought her these alphabet Legos and she started to make words with them. So we had to buy like 2-3 sets, because when she was making a word like foot that has 2 O's in it, she would get upset if she doesn't have a second O, and she would start making words with these. And it wasn't even in order. So she's had a big pile of Legos on the side, and then she just took a look at it, and then she could pick out the letters she needed. It didn't have to be in order. It was a big shock for us. And I think this is why it was so hard for us when they tried to tell us how severely autistic she is, and then she's going to need a special school, and she might not talk properly. And they were keep telling us all these scary things. And till to this day, she has so high support needs. But at the time, it was so difficult to accept that, because I was like, what are you talking about? She's a genius. How can you tell me she might never live alone? Like, how can you say that? She's literally a genius. Look, she's writing words and stuff. It was really hard for us to process this, but we're working with her every day, and we're really, really hoping that at least she's going to have some sort of independence when she grows up. And alongside this focus, there were also big emotional reactions, especially because she couldn't communicate her wants or needs. She could get really, really frustrated. Number 7 were meltdowns, not tantrums, proper meltdowns that lasted up to an hour. She would cry so much, and then sometimes she would just cry until she fall asleep. I know some people share some very raw moments, and I don't mean to pry or judge, but for us, I would never, ever, ever film when Emma is in distress. So in this channel, you're not going to see a footage of this, but I will do my best to explain to you in my own words. I remember many, many times we were playing or we were just in the kitchen or anything. Nothing happened. She didn't want anything. She didn't need anything. And then I could see her face changing. And then she just was staring in front of her. And then it became pink around her eyes. And then after a few seconds, she just started sobbing, absolutely crying her heart out. If she let me, then I would hold her in my hug and I tried to comfort her and offer her anything. She was just crying so much. And it happened very frequently. I think the best way for me to explain her meltdowns at the time is she wasn't crying to get her way. She just literally got so overwhelmed with her environment or the situation or just had a long day or anything. She just broke down completely. As opposed to a tantrum where, for example, in a tantrum for Emma, she liked to draw on her chalkboard or she liked to draw on a paper, and sometimes she would try and draw on the walls. And if I said no, that she would get really frustrated and upset. That's very different from a meltdown. When Emma was overwhelmed, she completely lost the ability to cope or regulate. And I could give her the word, she still wouldn't stop crying because she couldn't control it. A lot of that overwhelm came from sensory differences. Sign number 8 was the sensory differences. Emma was extremely sensitive to certain noises. I think the worst for her was the vacuum. Even if she would just see me bring the vacuum towards the room, she would completely lose it. And she would grab this massive Hoover from me and try to drag it out of the room. She just couldn't handle it. And the other thing, the washing machine, which still happens to this day. So she's 7 now. She lets us vacuum, but still to this day, she won't let me run the washing machine when she's at home. I have to do the laundry when she's at school. It's not the loudness of the washing machine. It's just somehow this mechanical voice. I'm not sure what is it with the voice because she can't explain it. But for some reason, the washing machine is still a big trigger for her. These sort of noises would upset her a lot, but then other kind of noises, even loud noises, wouldn't bother her that much. So it was a little bit odd that it was so specific. Mostly these noises coming from the machines. It would absolutely terrify her. And she also liked to squeeze into tight places. She would climb in the washing machine and try to rock herself with the drum. She would climb in all sorts of cupboards. Anytime she saw a basket, she would empty it and sit in it. She would climb under her bed, or very often she liked to be in my hug and she wanted me to squeeze her really nice and tight, and she really liked certain sensations. So when we went to the garden, she was absolutely amazed by the wind touching her skin. Another big and very worrying sign was related to safety. Sign number 9 was a lack of danger awareness. Emma would climb, jump, and put herself in risky situations without any sense of fear. She didn't seem to understand the danger or the consequences. I used to have a toy kitchen that I put next to the kitchen cupboard so she could stay with me while I'm cooking. I was hoping that she would copy what I'm doing with the toy kitchen accessories. But the problem was that she would climb onto the toy kitchen, and then from the toy kitchen, she would climb onto the kitchen counters, and then she was just running around on the top of the kitchen counters. So we've had to remove that. But then after that, she would get chairs and stuff, and she would just go and climb in the sink and then open the water on herself and things like this, which is really, really dangerous. So I could literally not take my eyes off her for 2 seconds. I had to take her to the bathroom with me and everything. And she also had no stranger awareness. So as I mentioned, she's very sensory. She likes the tight hugs, and she would often just run up to strangers as well and put her hand up like this, waiting for them to pick her up. Even when we try to take her to the supermarket or anything, sometimes she would run around. She didn't even see where we are. So she just went to a random person and put her hand up, like a complete stranger that we've never even met before. And even when I visited my sister abroad, who she's never met, we went to their house. She just straight away went past them, made herself at home. And when she needed a milk, she just climbed next to the, not complete stranger, they were family, but complete stranger to her. And she would just lie down next to them and let them bottle feed her and stuff. Like she had absolutely no awareness of being around people she doesn't know. And finally, one of the hardest areas for us was food. Sign number 10 was food anxiety. And this is something gradual. So it doesn't work like you wake up one day and then you don't eat anything anymore. It's a really slow and gradual process. It happens day by day. As I mentioned in my previous video, as a baby, she ate a really good range of foods. We always gave her proper cooked food. We've cooked her proper dinners, and she ate fruits, vegetables, rice, chicken, fish, everything. She had a really, really great diet. But then just after her first birthday, she started to be more cautious with the food. And even with things like chocolate or anything, she would just pinch it in her 2 fingers and then put it into her mouth and barely take the smallest possible bite. And then she just started lining up the food in her plate. And then she just became very slowly more and more selective with the foods that she was accepting. And at first, she would eat pancakes from the plate and leave the eggs and the fruit in there that she previously loved. But then after a while, around 2 years and a few months, she started to do this thing where she completely just freezes at the sight of food. So she would sit down and just bury her face in her hands like this. And she would completely just go silent, and she wouldn't reply to us if I tried to move her hand or anything. She wouldn't even react. And it was just purely because of the sight of the food. Slowly, her diet became even more restricted. And this went on for a while. And it's got so bad that by the age of 4, she was tube fat for a year. But that's a story for another video. I'm going to make a video about ARFID, which is about this very, very, very restricted diet, usually less than 10 foods accepted. And over time, eating became a source of stress rather than enjoyment for her. And it wasn't about the taste, it was more about textures and just this general anxiety around food. And I think this was really heartbreaking for us to see, because I was always so proud of her excellent diet and how she ate everything. By the time that Emma was 2, these signs together made it very obvious that she was autistic. You okay? This video isn't about labeling children or diagnosing anyone. It's about sharing our real experiences with real footage, so other parents can recognize the patterns earlier. If you found value in this video, then consider subscribing to our channel for more SEL-focused family content. This is something quick, easy, and free that you can do to support our channel. Bye! See you in the next video!
Bye.